And so we wanted to ask you a series of questions, around 5 to 6 questions. The first one is about the role of autonomy and autonomy learning in the future of education. How do you see that as part of the process of future education for new generations?
I think certainly we recognize that students learn at different paces. They have different motivations, different skills, and maybe different interests as they fuel their future. We know that the workplace has gotten far more specialized with the diversity of jobs and jobs options becoming not only more complex for educators, but obviously more opportunity for students to fuel the future economy. So with those reflections, we've got to recognize the new capability, which is the capability technology has to actually make what was an impossible task for an educator to help every student learn at their own pace and learn differently real. That was hard to do. If you think about an education construct, we were built where the education time was limited, the educators were limited, and the resources were limited. So we use the current structure where we teach time and place and do assessment as a model to drive the process forward. That's what the fabric of education has been. But in a world where content is not only limitless, but available all the time, where the learning is taking place largely outside of the classroom or beyond the lecture, we've got to think about the ways in which technology can help personalize that experience for learners so they can ignite their passions, fuel the skills that they're going to need for the job. And that's one of the things that I think the ability of the cloud, the richness of data and data connectivity across systems, and the emergence of AI in education is going to enable that personalized learning stream to be real in schools.
Yeah, so you kind of hit on the agenda of technology in the future of education and the role of AI and the role of Microsoft. And
Sure.
What are you guys doing regarding those issues?
Well, I think that one of the things that we see is that schools collect lots of data. Some of this data is in paper, some of it is digital. Some of it is connected to systems that never even talk to each other. But the most fundamental reality that exists is the data that's in the head and the heart of an educator. If you think about what happens on the first day of school when the educator meets his or her students, they know very little about those students. They may know their name, they may know what their grade was in the last grade level, maybe a couple of sentences about the student. But then imagine what happens during the course of the school year and the tearful goodbyes that happen at the last day of school. How much knowledge that educator has of what motivates a student, what a student is connected to, the passions, the friends even that they collaborate best with, the kind of learning style that motivates students. And most of that is flushed out for a new educator to learn at the end of the year. So we've got to think about what we're collecting on data and then bring that together with purpose to drive outcomes. Data is not an accountability measure. It's not a measure of looking at what's working, what's failing. It's actually a foundation for how you drive the experiences that you want inside schools. So we've got to elevate how schools are using data. It starts with some basic things. Monitoring what we're collecting. How do we collect more insight? How do we get micro insight from students, not just wait for a test score to track a student progress? How do we make that data not only transparent, available, and readable and actionable for educators, parents, students? But then how do we align experiences that are fueled by data to help us make decisions, help us to monitor behavior, help us to create that connection and personalization that we need? We're working to make that process real by infusing AI into our productivity resources, by working on data connectors. We just recently acquired a company, technology, Bright Bytes DataSense. DataSense actually has hundreds of connectors to actually fuel data and actually make data insight more actionable. That will be resonant in our cloud platform and fueling our productivity experiences. And tools like Power BI, Microsoft Flow, collecting insight from forms that is used in Office 365. So we can actually help schools think about their data estate and how they fuel that data to drive experiences more directly. Because it's not about teachers or parents or even students looking at charts and graphs. That is really proven to be very ineffective because teachers don't have the time, maybe even the mindset to rely on looking at data. What we need to do is have the data to fuel the interactions that we have every day, and that's the work that we can do if we integrate data and use AI to power it.
Great. And the other outcomes of this process, even a movement you can call it.
Sure.
What are those skills and tools that you see are relevant for the future? From this data analysis and the sense that it comes, what are the tools that the kids who are going to be the future leaders?
Yeah, I think it's this reality of skills, this is going to be important for Chile as we think about the future GDP, the future job growth, etc. What's happened is the workplace around us is becoming more global. It's becoming a workplace defined by skills. And I like to say that the workplace of the past was a workplace where people found jobs. They moved to cities, they moved to factories, they moved to countries where the work was. In the new future, the work finds the people. So if you have students who have an entrepreneurial mindset, that are leaders, that understand how to communicate and collaborate with their vision, they can start something and plant a seed that will grow and create jobs and actually move economies forward. So we think about these skills, they're obviously the ones that are mostly human. Leadership, collaboration, the ability to shift mindset. Those are critical, and this new world of work is absolutely fueled by that. If you think about an industrial economy that existed for a century before, collaboration not only was not needed, it wasn't really allowed. You know, if you're in a factory line, you've got to do your job. Creativity certainly was not part of it. But today's innovation is fueled by that. Now, we often focus on the jobs that are being eliminated. You know, the rise of technology and robots and AI as displacing lots of jobs. I will say that that's partly true, but the part of that is true has always been true. That every new technology throughout history has displaced jobs. But like computers may have displaced a typewriter, it opened up a wider variety of jobs than ever what will exist before. The same thing will be true, or should be true, with AI, robotics, quantum computing, all the different emersions of technology. The difference is, in many cases at the time, we didn't see the difference. The difference is the need for differentiated skills is growing. Transferable skills when you were building a horse and a buggy carriage for transport was easy made to transport to building the early Model T Ford and cars that were being assembled. You can see that transferable skills. Now we're actually saying we're going to displace roles that require a very different set of skills. And that's where the foundation of education comes in. And I believe now there's never been a point in human history where the role of our schools, educators, universities has been more intrinsically important because of this skill shift and this workplace opportunity that exists, not a gap, an opportunity that exists with new skills, and that's going to be an area. Now, one of the things that's often maybe overemphasized is this digital transference of skills. And partly it's overemphasized because all roles are fueled with technology. That's a given. But not every role is going to be a technology role. You know, when someone who's driving a truck is replaced by an autonomous vehicle, that person doesn't necessarily need to be a computer scientist or programmer. They may need to think about what services can we do in a trucking line that's autonomous? How do we expand the environment? They could use this technology foundation to create new companies, new industries, etc. So we're going to need that entrepreneurial mindset, that creativity as part of a core skill set. But as it relates to the technology skills that we're going to need, it's far different often than what's being taught in schools. We often focus on coding and computer science as a developer issue. We want to teach kids how to program. And the reality is, while that's important, the way in which computers and technologies are derived is far deeper, and actually computer programs are getting far more intuitive, that skill is less needed. What we need to have students understand computational thinking, how to apply technology to solve problems, how to use data and become a data scientist, to understand how do we fuel decisions and activities and experiences with data. We need students to understand how to harness AI in any industry to actually drive outcomes. So there's a range of new technology skills that we're going to need that's far beyond just coding. What I think the most important thing for schools to do is to get students to understand that technology is not something that you use. It's something that you create, build, shape, think with. If you just see technology as just another tool in a drawer, you actually miss the opportunity to actually rethink a lot of the things that you're doing. And that's what I think we need to start to do. Challenge students to harness the true potential that they can do.
So when we challenge students,
you also have to bring meaning to it.
Yes.
And then somehow a sense of care of what they're doing on their environment, on their context. How do you see those concepts there?
Everything about it, we're talking a lot in flagship schools about the school build. Everything is with purpose. Every decision is made in a purposeful way for pedagogy, learner outcomes, learner emotion. You know, we don't often photograph, we don't often budget for, we don't often put physical construct around the culture and the emotional connection the school has to students, but it's really the heart of what drives impact. When you have students walking into your school, expecting more from their future, believing that the role they have in their classroom is the fuel that they're going to have to go forward, everything else falls into place. The role of an educator becomes easier. The value of the technology investment becomes more fulfilled. So you've got to start with that mindset shift and that cultural change that's hard to measure. We've got to motivate kids, but I have to tell you, the one part of every change that's happening in education that I have less worry about is the opportunity for students to exceed our expectations. In all the cases and all the travel I've gone, anytime you give students a challenge and they believe that you are sincere and authentic with the challenge and they're shown an opportunity for them to apply their talents, they always overwhelm us and deliver far more than we thought possible. So I believe that students are resilient and amazing, and I think if we give them the right foundation, I think we can, you know, unleash that talent that's in your classroom already.
Now, as you mentioned, you travel a lot. You've been to many schools. What schools or what elements from those schools that you've traveled can you point out as elements that are relevant for us to bring into account, and maybe sometimes we leave behind?
Yeah, well, a lot of it has to do with the people, but I'll give you examples of what I see in good, bad examples. The vision of the school is pervasive. I often will, a typical visit will have, I'll start out with a school leader, and he or she will share their strategy for their school design. And it usually is end-to-end, it's usually holistic, and it's often very impressive. But then I'll find that it actually doesn't hold across the school. Students, certainly educators, should be aware of what the plan is. They should understand why this room looks like this and the decision is made. Why are we using this pedagogy approach versus another? And I find that it often is on the back of one person to drive. And often those people are amazing and heroic, but they need to bring the school along, the parents, the community along. So the best schools have this shift, being much more transparent and connected. Being purposeful about every decision. Why do you name a room the way you name it? Sometimes it could be to inspire a student about a great figure in history. Some may be about the name of a university, because you want to inspire students in a remote village to see themselves going into a university. Some cases it could be to actually have students think with inclusion and diversity. So you want to think about it, those elements, everything from the naming to the language that you use into the school to how innovation is achieved. When decisions are made, what process are you following? And so schools have purpose in everything, and they have a rigor to that is constant in their DNA. Common language, etc., that I think is important. Great schools, though, are often about students. So I visit sometimes schools that the journey of the school visit is often about technology. I get shown a room with 3 computers, then 5, then 20, then a computer lab with 100 computers, then maybe even a data center. And the idea is to showcase what I can see and look at all the technology. But really, for me, when I go to a great school and a student takes me on a tour and they show me around the school and say, this is why we do this and this is how this is, and I love this about this school, and I immediately get connected to this is a place that I like. I often go on tours and I get brought into a specific classroom with a specific teacher doing amazing things. And that exists all over Chile, it exists all over the US, where inside of an existing school, there's amazing innovation that often happens without the awareness of the leader. They don't see it, they don't even understand what's special, and they don't share it with each other. And a lot of times the teachers don't. Sometimes the teachers close the door and they invent plutonium, but they don't realize it And so they don't bother to share, they just assume other teachers are doing the same thing. Or they maybe see what they're doing is not special. In some cases, they feel like we couldn't share it because they shouldn't be doing it because they're doing something against the guidance of the leader. So what we need to do is actually break free from that and actually make it more transparent. But when I go on these tours, I see these classrooms. But I've learned to break free from the tour. So I say I've got to go to the restroom, etc., and I walk down the hall and I start to poke around and look in other parts of the school. But typically, someone will come running after me and say, you don't need to look in there. There's nothing special going on. And it really is not true, but also sad that sometimes we don't realize what's special about what, and it's happening in every classroom with every educator. A good leader, a good school, minds that. They understand that it's the role of an educator to export their good ideas and to import ideas from others in the community. And you build this collection of educators that are working towards a common purpose and not closing the door in their classroom and figuring it out. That happens far too much, and that's why the pace of change may feel slower, because we see examples of greatness, but it doesn't happen pervasively. That's why change feels worse. It's not that we don't have change happening, and it's not that it's not possible, but because we have so many gaps between one educator doing one thing and another, it actually doesn't feel like we're moving fast enough. But I think we've got to build that foundation.
And the final question, I know you're running out of time, so what's about the flagship model?
Yeah.
What are the future of this? What are your vision for this model?
So,
what's the role of the schools? And then what's the future relationship of these schools with Microsoft?
So I'd like to, there's a few things. I'd like to learn a lot about what it should be, right? You know, one of the things that we decided, and this program was probably launched a little later than I'd hoped, partly because the folks on my team were waiting to figure out the program more before we actually launched. And I was constantly saying, no, we got to learn what schools need from us, what role can we play. It's part of this journey. So some of this still needs to be determined. What the goal of this is actually to create a collective, maybe bring support to outlaws and mavericks and people who are going to challenge the status quo in their country.
So to pioneers.
Yeah, and to these pioneers, sometimes safety in numbers, right? Sometimes to say, hey, this is vetted by a global set of partners, Microsoft, Fielding Air, Steelcase, Gensler. They've looked at it and they bless the work that we've done. Sometimes that can help build confidence inside the school to try and challenge new thinking. In some cases, these amazing schools that we get connected to are only going to be helped by other like-minded school leaders challenging in their own way and bringing that together to help accelerate our ideas. And so we want to create this incubation moment where we are sharing, we're learning, but also getting deep on certain areas. So when a school says, hey, we'd love Microsoft to help vet our security framework to help keep kids safe in schools, does it work? And Microsoft people who have expertise in security and working with partners that understand IoT sensors and how we can make our schools safer can help guide a school on that journey. It may be pushing for inclusivity and where can we help schools be more inclusive, both with design, technology, etc. So I think there will be points where Microsoft gets very deep, and then there are points where Microsoft becomes a connector and supporter of bringing people together and celebrating the motion going forward, and that will change over time. We want this journey to be one that we constantly feel comfortable challenging and pushing the boundaries, where we can feel comfortable saying, this is not where it needs to be, or hey, we've got to think differently about that. And you giving us the same thing, Microsoft, we need help here, we need help there. It's less about our products or technology, but we want to make sure that we can think about how we can help, bring the value of the company to bear, but also the partners that we can bring together for schools. Then when we get the schools open, we hope that we can continue to celebrate the schools and learn from the schools. So I expect our engagement with flagship schools to exist long after. I'd like to see us have a person embedded in the school to help learn from the educators, to work with teachers, and also hopefully be a tour guide. Because I imagine the greatest schools that we work with are going to be an attraction for schools in the community, in other countries to visit. And so we want to have someone on place to both learn from the educators, help guide our journey, and then also handle a lot of the visits so we can share the work that's going on. Because we want these flagship schools to inspire other schools. And what we want to do is have cohorts. So with the folks here in Flagship School Summit, we'll continue to meet via calls and other projects We may identify people to work on, let's say we're going to work on a data migration story and a data insight story. So maybe 3 of the schools will work together and collectively another set of schools will work on inclusivity. We'll bring ideas together. And then we'll graduate to where schools are open and we're trying new models and new testing with Microsoft support and other partners that we bring in. And then in a couple of years, we'll bring a whole new set of cohorts that's starting from scratch. And they'll learn from the blueprints and models in place. They'll learn by visiting schools that we've already established and say, how do we leverage that, et cetera. And then hopefully these become so common that when schools are built, this is the way in which they're done. Right now, what we often see is schools are built in large bulk with old models and architecture structure, and then the innovation happens after. But now that we've got the building, now let's put all the good thinking in. And we believe that we have an opportunity to influence it from the start. But flagship schools is a mindset. We expect new buildings, old buildings, refurb buildings, pop-up learning spaces to all infuse these ideologies into them, and hopefully this initial set of schools will help lead the way. And I think that's really what our mission is. We also have to make sure that along the way we help make the school successful. The basic things of how do learning outcomes happen? Are we doing better test scores? I would want to make sure that every flagship school is producing better results than the other schools in the area, the country. We need to at least be in top 10 rankings of school performance and activities, and that's where, and it may not happen year 1, it may not happen year 5, but that's what we've got to commit to, putting the foundation in place to making these schools the best schools they can be.
So it's kind of like creating a network that turns to be an ecosystem.
That's the goal. I think that, right now we hope that, we believe that this is going to inspire others. And when we reached out to flagship schools, I'll give you an example of our mindset changing. We initially did it to serve the schools in the greatest need, where countries were actually building cookie cutter schools with templates that were designed in the 70s to bring in. And the architects didn't have an appreciation of technology, and the holistic ecosystem was not being embraced because there were a lot of people on the pedagogy and the learning side came in way too late into the building and construction phase. And so we said, this has got to change. So we initially said, let's help the folks who need it the most. When we announced the program, the opposite happened. The schools that reached out who wanted to be in there were the best schools, the schools that were most thoughtful, with the leaders that had the best ideas. Those people, which it's something that we should have anticipated, which was a surprise, but we should have realized, because this is true with the best schools now. When I visit schools, the best schools have the most aggressive agenda for change. Ironically, I go into schools that have worse performance, and their leader is more comfortable with defending the status quo. When I go to an amazing school and the leaders are delivering great results, they're telling you about the 15 other projects that they're working on. The same thing has happened with flagship schools. When we announced this project, the best school thinkers, the best leaders came forward and said, I want to be part of that, because I want to challenge my school, I want to hold my school up to a global scrutiny to say, is this school really good? And I want to connect to other people. And I think that community will just continue to grow and grow as we deliver results. So hopefully this is the start of something big. Look back in 10 years and say, we've got all these flagship schools coming with this ideology that were born from this initial phase. So we've got to be successful with all of us and look forward. I'm excited for the next few years.
Well, we're really honored to be part of this flagship team, and we're going to put all of our energy and efforts to make it.
I'm looking forward to the journey. We're going to learn a lot. Hopefully, we'll fail sometimes. That's part of the whole learning experience, but what we need to do is constantly be talking and sharing and learning from each other as we go.
Well, thank you very much for the time.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here.